What is going on, everybody, and welcome back into Barley Studios. This is more of a tips and tricks, kind of like a fun video to go in that playlist here on my YouTube channel. Now, this is kind of a highlight or a side clip of the full-length content, and in this video, we're going to be working on sculpting some milk bones. Now, these milk bones are going to be used for a 3D tumbler topper. That the straw will kind of poke through there, and it's just going to be a nice little fun accent to go on top of an amazing customer's commission order. So I do this a few different ways here. Now, the first way we're going to do is we're going to try to sculpt it freehand. And it turns out okay. You can kind of see them in the background right there on my parchment paper, but the dimensions are just slightly off, and it's because I didn't have a reference or anything to kind of trace over, and it's not super far off as far as dimensions, but they're just not really where they're supposed to be. So I went out and bought some milk bones. We don't usually give these to my dog, but we went out and bought some anyways. I was at Target, as it were, the bougie Walmart, and decided to buy a box of these. My dog is absolutely loving them, of course, because they are peanut butter flavored. I wonder why they make them different colors when they're all the same flavor. Makes you wonder, right? Does that mean there's a separate assembly line just for different colors, or is there all the same type of batch, or they have to dye them separately, right? Makes you wonder. So what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and try to revamp these dog bones so they're just a little bit more proportional to what they're supposed to be. Now, in the full-length content for making the topper, I do go into this a little bit more in-depth in some ways, and I do kind of show where I kind of went wrong with this. But we're going to go ahead and squish these. Smush them into nothing. And we're going to reuse these pieces of clay here just to revamp these little stenciled out milk bones. Hopefully this round will turn out slightly better. Now, the real label of this video is us using clay to make a stenciled mold imprint that we can reuse over and over again. So if I wanted to ever make another milk bone piece of clay or artwork, then I could do so just by using the same stamp. We're going to use clay to make this stamp here in just a few moments. Going to go ahead and get a nice piece of clay kind of smushed out here. And we're going to go ahead and use the bones themselves to kind of dictate the height of that clay block. So we'll kind of push that down, and then we're going to put the milk bone right on top of it, and we're going to use just a bladed tool. Not an X-Acto knife because it's a little bit too deep for that, but we're going to use just a bladed tool to cut out the stencil of the actual bone itself. So I started off with the X-Acto knife. As I say, it's just not deep enough, so we're going to go to a little bladed tool here. And we're just going to kind of roughly go around the outside edges and peel that clay away. Not too bad. So as we kind of peel this away here, it'll give us just a rough trace of the actual bone itself. It'll give us correct proportions. And then we have a nice, really sharp-edged piece of clay here. So we're going to go ahead and use the X-Acto knife and just carve away just very roughly the outside edges of that milk bone. And it's going to kind of give us those rounded edges when we kind of smooth these edges out a little bit with our finger. Kind of smooth that out a little bit, just give it just a nice smooth edge, and we'll also carve out the bottom as well. Looking pretty good. So I started by doing it, just kind of going around the outside edges in a downward carving motion, and eventually I just actually picked the whole item up and I just carve it out that way. But as long as you're just kind of taking away from that, it depends on if that side's going to be visible on the piece of art that you're specifically using it for, or something like that. But in my situation, is part of this will be kind of inset in the Kibbles dog food that we're going to have on the topper as well. Cleaned up our little workstation there with some little scraping action here, and now we can actually smooth out those edges by just holding it in our hand. It's a lot easier than it was actually carving it out by freehand. The freehand was great, but it's just slightly not long enough, so it just looks, it could look kind of off. It would have been fine if you really weren't looking for those defects, but we want to be as exact as possible, just because the topper is going to have real size kibble dog food on it, and we want the bones to look proportional. We're going to go ahead and roll out another one of these because we want two of them. Here's the other one. Magic of editing. We kind of jump forward there in time. We're going to remove that outside edge, kind of jagged 90-degree edge there. And we'll go ahead and smooth that out by hand as well. Not too bad. It's actually a really easy process, and it's actually quite relaxing just to kind of like just to have some fun with some little small pieces of clay like this. And because the overall milkbone itself has a very rough, like print, like maybe stamped or and then baked like texture here. It's very crackly, very rocky. Is very rough, and you don't have to worry about it being super smooth or textured in any way. You can just really throw on some texture, and it just really just mirrors whatever you need it to be. As long as the proportions are correct and we can get that milk bone stamp on top of it, the rest will take care of itself. So there's our bones there. We got 2 of them sending off to the side there. Looking pretty good, you guys. So again, milk bones are still pretty good. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to take the imprint of the wording. So I was originally thinking about actually hand carving all of that into the bones themselves, and I just think that it would just be a little bit too much work just for something small like this. Not saying I couldn't. I could spend here an hour here and carve out all of those little like wording and little hearts and everything. But why not just use what we have at our disposal? And we have a little bit extra clay here. So what we'll do is we'll just kind of roll out a nice thick like little log of clay there. And we're just going to push that down onto the top of the wording and the hearts and the little edge markings there. And we're going to roll that onto the edges of the actual bone itself. And that way it has like a little imprinted area where the bone or the little bone that we sculpted will sit into this stamp. So let's create a little bit of a finger hold there just so I can apply downward pressure when the time comes. And you want that clay to be relatively thick just so that you have a lot of durability to it, depending on how much pressure you want to put on, depending on the type of the clay that you're using. In this situation, we are using Sculpey Original, which is very forgiving, is very easy to work with. But if I ever want to pull out some Sculpey 3 or something a little bit more firm, then I don't want that stamp that I made to deteriorate or break when I'm using it. That'd be the worst scenarios. I'm using it, I'm rock and rolling through a project, and then I pick it up and use it, and it just breaks in half. And I'm just like, well, daggone, now I got to go back and I got to remake it all over again. We're going to create that little kind of like horizontal texture on the bottom of the bone. I guess that would be from where like is baked on like maybe like some kind of conveyor belt of some sort. I don't know. Maybe I'll look up on YouTube how's it made, these bones. And what we're going to do is we're just going to use a silicone tip tool with the blade there, or the actual like channel that the silicone tip tool is held onto like the actual tool with. I guess that would be like a channel or a, I'm not quite sure, but a silver piece. We're just going to use a silver piece, and we're just going to use a kind of a back and forth motion just to kind of give it a nice like edged, rippled texture there. Now I did make some little pieces that go on the sides of the bones as well. So I actually have a total of 3 of these stamps, and they've already been baked to perfection. Looking pretty good, you guys. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this to imprint onto the bones that we sculpted the pattern that we need. The texture on the sides just don't hold up as well as the wording did because it's a flat surface. So although I do try to put this in here, and it does kind of help me form my bone shape a little bit more, and it kind of gives it that like ripple texture around the bottom kind of ridge, maybe where it's like injection molded or something. I don't know. But it does help with a little bit of texture. But we'll have to come in and apply our own texture in a moment with our really intricate, very detailed texture tool there here in a minute. If you do see the full length content, you'll see what I'm using to create that kind of a dimpling texture. Look at that milk bone, you guys. Looking pretty good. I'm digging how it's turning out so far. Now here I do make a mistake here, and I went ahead and I put that down there again, and I imprinted it on there again. So I was like, oh, let's get those little wording a little bit deeper. Oh dear. So if you do this, just make sure that you put the stamp on the correct direction. That's all I'm going to say here. So just make sure that you put it on the correct direction. That way you don't have to smooth it out and redo it all over again. Wah, wah. That did not turn out the way that I intended it to, so I do have to repair that one. But here you can see I'm making the second one there, and this one actually turns out even better than the first one. And it really looks great. The overall dry brushing and the washes that we're going to apply these later make them feel more like textured and bone-like. In the overall texture that the batter is when they bake these is going to be really cool. Making sure it's on the correct way this time. I'm going to apply a little bit more texture to the back of this one. Not too bad. See, even this situation, we're actually not using the tool itself. We're using a piece of the tool to create the overall texture that we need. Yes, I know this is a little like plastic miniature that I have in a set, and it's been sitting off to the side of my studio for a while. And I'm like, well, I'm looking around for something to make some like a little like jagged like rock texture, and I'm like, look, I can use that. So I do go ahead and pull that that little raven out, and we use that to create the overall rock or kind of like baked batter type of look to it. We're going to go ahead and give it a dry brush here just so you can see what the overall finished effect looks like. But you could use that clay and make an imprint stamp of anything that you'd like, truly. And it just is really quick and easy. And that probably clay in total only costed me like like 75 cents or something, so of the entire block, you know. So not too bad. And it was a really quick process. You just got to make it. But the most time you actually spend in making it is just waiting for the thing to bake in the oven before you can make your final sculpted piece here. Hope you guys enjoyed the video of this tips and tricks. Make sure you check out the full-length video of us creating the overall dog topper. Later, guys.